The Zombie Slaves of Zanzibar, 1830s to 1860s. A nightmare of drugged enslavement on the Spice Island. In the early 19th century, Zanzibar was the epicenter of the East African slave trade, ruled by the Omani Sultanate. Tens of thousands of enslaved Africans were shipped to the island's clove and spice plantations, where they endured unimaginable suffering. But among the worst fates was that of the so-called zombie slaves. Men and women robbed of their minds, forced to work in a living death. The horror begins, captured and drugged. Slave caravans arrived in Zanzibar after grueling marches from the interior, Congo, Tanzania, Malawi, where captives were already broken by thirst, whippings, and disease. But some traders went further. To prevent rebellion or escape, they used powerful plant drugs to induce a trance-like state. The most common method was datura, locally called mvul, a hallucinogenic plant that could render a person docile, disoriented, and unable to resist. Survivors described being force-fed a bitter paste or smoke that made the world melt into nightmares. Some lost memories of their past. Others believed they were already dead. The plantations of the living dead. On the clove plantations, overseers preferred these zombie slaves because they were worked without complaint, their minds shattered. European visitors wrote in shocked diaries of laborers who moved like ghosts, blank-eyed, responding only to direct commands, their bodies moving but their souls seemingly gone. Some accounts claimed that if the drug wore off, the enslaved would minds wake up, screaming, realizing where they were. To prevent this, they were kept in a constant cycle of intoxication. Many died from overdose, starvation, or simply collapsing from exhaustion. The underground resistance. Not all victims stayed docile forever. A few, who managed to avoid the worst doses, plotted escapes. Some ran into the island's dense forests, where they were hunted down by Arab slave militias with dogs. Others threw themselves into the sea, preferring drowning to the living hell of the plantations. Rumors spread among the enslaved that the drug turned people into walking corpses. That if they died in that state, their souls would never be free. This fear was so strong that some refused to eat, choosing starvation over the fate of losing their minds. The lingering curse. Even after the British forced the Sultan of Zanzibar to abolish the slave trade in 1873, survivors of the zombie ordeal were left broken. Some never fully recovered their memories. Others were shunned by their own communities, feared to be hollow vessels carrying a dark spiritual taint. To this day, some elders in Zanzibar whisper about shadows in the old plantations. Phantom workers still trapped in their endless labor, their moans carried on the wind at night. The Lion of the Mande, the story of Samurai Toure. In the heart of 19th century West Africa, when empires rose and fell with the sweep of a sword and the stroke of a pen, a boy named Samurai Toure was born into the Dula people, traders of gold, cola, and knowledge. Born around 1830 in the town of Minyankala, now in southeastern Guinea, Samurai grew up surrounded by the whispers of the old Mali Empire and the bustle of caravan routes connecting the Sahel to the Atlantic coast. But Samurai's youth would not be one of peace. One day, his village was raided, and his mother was taken captive by a neighboring warlord. In a twist of fate that would shape a legend, Samurai joined the army of her captors, not to serve, but to bide his time. Years passed, And when he had risen through the ranks, he secured her freedom and walked away from his enemies. No longer a mere soldier, but a man with a purpose. Samurai Ture had seen the cost of disunity and vulnerability. He swore that his people would never again be so exposed. What began as a quest for protection evolved into a vision of empire. He gathered loyal followers, married into influential families, and offered neighboring chiefs peace or submission. Through skillful diplomacy and fearless warfare, samurai carved out a kingdom that came to be known as the Wani Wasulu Empire, stretching across today's Guinea, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, and parts of Burkina Faso. But this was no mere collection of conquests. Samurai built a Matu Titur, Wad State Hitud, with Islamic law, governors, tax collectors, and a standing army of tens of thousands. He trained his soldiers with firearms, smuggled through British colonies and Muslim traders from Sierra Leone. He employed blacksmiths to repair and even copy European rifles. He treated his soldiers as professionals and demanded discipline, obedience, and religious piety. But samurai's greatest battle was yet to come. From the west, the French crept closer. Their railways and steamships whispered the arrival of an empire from another world. In 1882, they encountered samurai's domain. Where others had folded, samurai fought. He used both pen and sword, signing treaties when necessary, breaking them when expedient. When the French seized key territories in Guinea, samurai burned his own capital at Kankan, rather than let them take it, retreating eastward and regrouping. His people called him the Black Napoleon, a strategist of rare genius who always stayed one step ahead. For over 16 years, Samurai Ture waged war against the French. He turned the forests of Upper Guinea and Côte d'Ivoire into mazes for enemy patrols. He trained snipers to hide in trees. His cavalry struck by night and vanished by dawn. But his enemies were relentless. French columns pressed in from every side. Ammunition ran low. His people, worn by war and displacement, began to lose hope. In 1898, near the village of Gueke, Samori Ture was finally captured. The lion had been caged. He was exiled to Gabon, far from his homeland, where he died in 1900. But his name did not die. It was carried in hushed songs sung in the dark, in the proud memories of elders, and in the history books of post-colonial Africa. Years later, his bloodline would rise again. His great-grandson, Ahmed Sékou Touré, became the first president of independent Guinea. In the very land where samurai had fought and bled, the cry of freedom returned. Legacy. Samurai Ture was not merely a warrior, he was a statesman, a visionary, and a symbol of resistance. His struggle reminds the world that Africa did not fall to colonialism without a fight, and that the story of Africa is not only one of suffering, but also of strength, strategy, and spirit.